The little girl had been missing for 3 years. 3 Christmases had passed without her mother hearing her voice, without knowing whether she was alive, safe, hungry, or afraid. The billionaire mother had spent millions searching for her daughter, hired private investigators, offered enormous rewards, and followed thousands of false leads. But on Christmas Eve, when the entire city was glowing with lights and families were rushing home for dinner, an exhausted single father noticed something nobody else had seen. A tiny red mitten lying beside a trash container. And when the former Navy SEAL heard a child quietly crying behind those trash bins, he had no idea that the next few minutes would completely change not only his life, but the life of one of the richest women in the country. Before we begin, if you believe that one small act of kindness can change someone's entire life, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay with this story until the end, because the truth behind that little girl's disappearance is something nobody expected. Christmas Eve had always been complicated for Daniel Carter. To most people, Christmas meant warmth, family, laughter, gifts, and a table full of food. For Daniel, it was a reminder of everything he had lost. Daniel was 38 years old. Years earlier, he had served as a Navy SEAL. He had spent years learning how to remain calm when everyone else was panicking, how to survive when circumstances seemed impossible, and most importantly, how to protect people who could not protect themselves. After leaving the military, Daniel had tried to build a normal life. He married young. He became a father. He thought he had finally found peace. But life had other plans. His marriage ended, and Daniel became a single father to his 7-year-old son, Noah. Money was tight. Daniel worked long hours repairing security systems and occasionally took overnight jobs to keep the bills paid. He lived in a small apartment with second-hand furniture, an old sofa, and a Christmas tree that had been passed down from a neighbor. But Noah didn't care. To him, that little tree was beautiful. Every year, Daniel promised his son that no matter how difficult life became, Christmas would still feel special. This year, however, Daniel was struggling. His rent was due. His car needed repairs. And there wasn't much money left for Christmas presents. Still, he had bought Noah one small gift. A used remote control car. It wasn't expensive, but Daniel had spent hours cleaning it and replacing the batteries. He had wrapped it himself. On Christmas Eve, Daniel finished a late security job around 11 at night. Snow had begun falling. He could have driven straight home, but he stopped at a convenience store to buy milk and bread. As he walked through a quiet side street, something caught his attention. A red mitten. It was lying in the snow near a large commercial trash container. Daniel stopped. He looked around. There was nobody nearby. Then he heard something. Very faint. A sound almost hidden beneath the wind. Crying. Daniel immediately became alert. His military instincts returned before he even had time to think. He moved slowly toward the container. "Hello?" he called softly. No answer. Then he heard it again. A child. Daniel carefully looked behind the trash containers. At first, he saw nothing. Then 2 frightened eyes appeared between some cardboard boxes. A little girl. She was curled up inside a narrow space between the wall and the trash containers. She looked about 8 years old. Her brown hair was tangled. Her cheeks were red from the cold. She wore a red Christmas coat, but it was dirty and torn. Her shoes were soaked. Daniel immediately removed his jacket. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl pressed herself against the wall. "Please don't send me back." Daniel froze. Those 4 words told him that this wasn't simply a lost child. Someone had frightened her. He crouched several feet away. "What's your name?" The girl didn't answer. Daniel noticed that she was shivering violently. He slowly placed his jacket on the ground. You can take this. I'm going to stay right here. After several seconds, the girl reached for it. Daniel waited. Finally, she wrapped the jacket around herself. I'm Daniel, he said. What's your name? The girl whispered something. What? Lily. Daniel smiled gently. Lily. That's a beautiful name. Her eyes filled with tears. Are you hungry? She nodded. Daniel took out the bread he had just purchased. He handed it to her. She began eating quickly. Too quickly. Daniel's expression changed. A child shouldn't eat like that unless she had been hungry for a long time. How long have you been here? Lily looked down. I don't know. Where are your parents? My mommy is looking for me. Daniel's heart tightened. How long have you been away from her? Lily looked at him. 3 years. Daniel stared at her. 3 years. There was no way an 8-year-old girl could have been missing for 3 years and still remember her mother so clearly. Unless she had been somewhere hidden. Daniel reached for his phone. I'm going to call the police, okay? Lily immediately grabbed his sleeve. No. She was terrified. Daniel lowered the phone. Why? They said if I tell anyone, they'll find me. Daniel's military instincts told him this was serious. He didn't ask more questions. Instead, he picked Lily up carefully and carried her toward his car. She was so light. Far too light. Daniel placed her inside, turned on the heat, and wrapped another blanket around her. Then he called emergency services. Within minutes, officers arrived. They began asking questions. But before Daniel could explain everything, one officer noticed something around Lily's neck. A necklace. A small silver pendant. The officer stared at it. Wait. He took out his phone. Do you know who this child is? Daniel shook his head. The officer searched a missing person database. Then his face changed. Daniel noticed immediately. What? The officer turned the phone around. A photograph appeared. It showed a smiling little girl standing beside a beautiful woman beneath a Christmas tree. The little girl looked exactly like Lily. Daniel looked at Lily. Then at the photograph. The officer whispered. This is Emily Bennett. Daniel frowned. Who is Emily Bennett? The officer looked at him. Her mother is Victoria Bennett. Daniel's eyes widened. Even he knew that name. Victoria Bennett wasn't just wealthy. She was a billionaire. She owned technology companies, luxury hotels, and investment firms across the country. And 3 years earlier, her 8-year-old daughter had disappeared. The case had become one of the biggest missing child stories in America. Daniel looked at Lily. Emily? The girl began crying. That's my name. Within an hour, the news spread. Emily Bennett had been found. Alive. On Christmas Eve. After 3 years. Victoria Bennett was at her mansion when the call came. She had been sitting beside a massive Christmas tree, staring at an empty chair. Every Christmas, she placed one small present on that chair. For her daughter. Even though everyone around her had told her to stop. Her private investigator had told her that after 3 years, the chances were extremely small. Her lawyers had advised her to accept reality. But Victoria never did. She kept searching. She kept believing. Then her phone rang. Ms. Bennett? Victoria stood immediately. Yes? We believe we found your daughter. The room went silent. Victoria couldn't breathe. Don't say that unless you're certain. We're certain. Victoria dropped the phone. She began crying. Not the quiet kind of crying. It was the kind that came from 3 years of fear finally breaking open. She grabbed her coat. "Get the car." Within minutes, she was racing through the snow. When Victoria arrived at the small police station, she ran through the doors. Then she saw her. Emily. Her daughter. Standing beside Daniel. Victoria stopped. For a moment, neither mother nor daughter moved. Emily stared at her. Then she whispered, "Mommy?" Victoria broke. She ran forward. Emily ran into her arms. The two of them collapsed onto the floor, holding each other and crying. Victoria kissed her daughter's hair again and again. "My baby." Emily cried against her shoulder. "I knew you'd come." Victoria closed her eyes. "I never stopped." Daniel stood quietly in the corner. He watched the reunion with tears in his eyes. He had seen people reunite before during his military career. But this was different. This was a mother getting 3 years of her life back. Victoria eventually looked toward him. "Who are you?" "I'm Daniel Carter." "You found her?" Daniel nodded. "I just heard her crying." Victoria stared at him. "You saved my daughter." Daniel shook his head. "I gave her a jacket and some food. She saved herself." Victoria couldn't understand his humility. Most people would have demanded money. Most people would have called reporters. Most people would have taken photographs. Daniel had done none of those things. The investigation began immediately. Detectives discovered that Emily had been moved between several locations over the previous 3 years. She had been kept isolated. She didn't remember every detail. But she remembered one important thing. A woman had taken her from a hotel parking garage 3 years earlier. Emily remembered being told that her mother didn't want her anymore. Victoria almost collapsed when she heard that. Because she realized what the kidnappers had done. They hadn't only stolen her daughter. They had spent years trying to convince Emily that her own mother had abandoned her. The detectives eventually uncovered evidence connecting the kidnapping to someone who had once worked inside Victoria's company. The man had been fired after stealing company money. He had blamed Victoria for destroying his life. He had arranged Emily's disappearance as revenge. But there was another shocking discovery. The reason Emily had escaped wasn't because her captors had released her. She had escaped herself. She had been kept in an abandoned building near the city. During a storm, part of the building's fence collapsed. Emily ran. She walked for hours. She became exhausted and eventually hid near the trash containers. That's where Daniel found her. Victoria listened to the story in disbelief. Then she looked at Daniel. "You found her when everyone else had stopped looking." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't know who she was. That's what makes it more incredible." A few days later, Victoria visited Daniel's apartment. She expected something different. Instead, she found a tiny living room, an old sofa, a simple kitchen, and a small Christmas tree. Noah was sitting on the floor playing with his new remote control car. Victoria noticed something. There was only one gift under the tree. She looked at Daniel. "Is that all?" Daniel smiled. "That's enough." Victoria looked at Noah. "What did Santa bring you?" Noah proudly held up the remote control car. "My dad bought it." Victoria looked at Daniel. "You don't know how much you deserve." Daniel smiled. "I don't need anything." Victoria shook her head. "Everyone says that until life gets hard." Daniel looked at her. "Life is already hard." Victoria became quiet. For the first time, she realized that the man who had saved her daughter was struggling himself. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't famous. He didn't have a mansion. He didn't have a private security team. He was simply a father trying to give his son a good life. And somehow, on the night when Victoria had lost all hope, this ordinary father had done something extraordinary. Victoria asked Daniel about his military service. He told her about the years he had spent as a Navy SEAL. He told her about the friends he had lost. He told her that after leaving the military, he wanted nothing more than a peaceful life with his son. But peace had been difficult to find. Victoria listened carefully. Then she said something Daniel never expected. "I want to offer you a job." Daniel immediately shook his head. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity." "What is it?" "A position managing security for my family and company." Daniel remained silent. Victoria continued. "You have the skills. You have the discipline. And most importantly, you have something money can't buy." "What?" "Character." Daniel looked at Noah. Then at Victoria. "I'll think about it." Months passed. Daniel eventually accepted the position. Not because Victoria had offered him money. He accepted because the job allowed him to spend more time with Noah while using the skills he had learned during his military service. But something even more beautiful happened. Emily and Noah became friends. The two children began spending Christmases together. Emily, who had once been afraid of Christmas, slowly learned to love it again. Noah taught her how to play with the remote control car. Emily taught Noah how to decorate cookies. And Victoria became part of their lives. She never tried to replace anyone. She simply became someone who cared. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, Daniel stood outside Victoria's mansion looking at the snow. The same holiday. The same snow. But everything had changed. Victoria walked toward him. "Do you remember that night?" Daniel smiled. "Every detail." Victoria looked toward the children inside. Emily was laughing. Noah was chasing her around the Christmas tree. Victoria said softly, "3 years ago, I thought Christmas had taken my daughter from me." Daniel looked at her. "And now?" She smiled through tears. "Now I know Christmas brought her home." Daniel nodded. Then Emily ran outside. "Dad!" Daniel turned. She wasn't his biological daughter. But she called him that sometimes. And every time she did, his heart became full. Emily hugged him. Victoria watched them. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of losing her daughter. She had learned something that money could never teach her. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive in expensive cars. Sometimes they don't come from private investigators or powerful lawyers. Sometimes they appear in the form of an exhausted single father walking home through the snow. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop when everyone else keeps walking. Daniel could have ignored that red mitten. He could have kept walking. He could have told himself that somebody else would handle it. But he stopped. He listened. He cared. And because of that one decision, a mother got her daughter back. A little girl got her childhood back. A struggling father discovered a new purpose. And 2 broken families found something they never expected to find. A second chance. So if there is one lesson from Daniel's story, it is this. Never underestimate the power of a small act of kindness. You may think you're simply helping someone for a few minutes. You may never know how much that moment means. You may never see the full impact of your decision. But kindness has a way of traveling farther than we can imagine. On that Christmas Eve, Daniel didn't know he was standing beside a billionaire's missing daughter. He didn't know millions of people were searching for her. He didn't know that his decision would change the rest of his life. He only knew that a child was cold, frightened, and alone. And that was enough. Because real heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear an old winter jacket. Sometimes they drive an old car. Sometimes they count every dollar before buying Christmas presents for their children.